Okay, hello and welcome to another run of Slay the Spire for Ironclad. I put up a video a week ago, and it's my first one of these. And I guess there's some ideas that I probably did. I don't think I talked through enough in terms of like deck building. So what I want to do with this run is play on an easier difficulty. So I'm going to play on Ascension 6. To try and just guarantee the win, because I'm going to be talking a lot about the cards that I'm picking and how that fits into the strategy going forward. So we're going to go ahead. So just, if you're curious, Ascension 6, least upon more often, all the enemies are deadlier. You heal less after boss battles, which means you don't heal the full after the acts, and then you start each run damaged. Okay, so we're going to talk to the whale. I like this. Obtain a random rare relic is some of the rare relics can be very nice. Losing 8 max HP isn't too bad because we're playing on Ascension 6, which 80 health is not too bad for that. So dropping down to 72 is, I don't mind it. Transformer card is also decent. You want to kind of get rid of your strikes and defends if you can. So transforming is kind of like getting rid of them for free, and sometimes you can get very lucky and you can get a better card. But I'm going to go for the random rare relic, I think. Okay, this is interesting. Wing boots. So wing boots basically mean I can ignore a path going through the levels, which can be sometimes very useful if you want to like hit another elite or a campfire or whatever. You can only get 3 charges though. Okay, so going through the map, again, you want to hit a few elites if you can, with a few rests. Okay, so on the right's not too bad. You have a campfire here before an elite. I always like to hit a campfire before an elite because you get to upgrade a card that you might need. And there's another elite here, and then we get 2 rests. Going up here, there's an elite here and a rest. Elite. I think that's too many elites before rest. I think this is probably the safer option, and it means you can hit 2 elites. Okay, so let's talk about the strategy that we're going for, basically. So, one thing I was aware, especially watching a friend of mine, Cinny's video, he did a run, and I guess watching that run, I'll probably be responding to that quite a bit. But I imagine they're quite the questions that he had and stuff are probably quite commonplace for people who are kind of trying to think about what to do with the cards they pick and all that such. So this run that I'm going to do is primarily going to be aimed at kind of addressing that. So the first thing I think you really need to keep in mind, and this underpins everything in Slay the Spire, is that you're never going to get the perfect deck. Okay, so for Ironclad, 2 of his quote-unquote perfect decks would be a strength deck and a block deck. There are others, but they're the 2 really, really basic ones. And in a like a control card game, what you would do is you would put in all of the guaranteed strength cards, and say stuff like Limit Break, for example, which really makes a strength deck go off. And then you would put in, like, say, some blocks and such to make sure that you're protected before you kind of ramp up into that strength. Similarly, with the block deck, you would put in, obviously you'd have your barricade, you'd have your entrench, which doubles your block, and then you'd have your body slam, which deals your block as damage. Barricade, sorry, I should probably explain, barricade means you retain block after a turn, so you don't just discard all your unused block. So that's how you would approach that in a control-based card game. Unfortunately, with Slay the Spire, you just don't get that freedom to do that. You're constantly being put up against threats, and you need to be able to deal with those threats. And trying to construct the perfect strength or the perfect block deck while those threats are fighting you just isn't going to cut it. So instead of thinking about the game like that and thinking about the perfect deck, you need to just really simplify it and think of it like a checklist, basically. So you have a number of things you need to check off for your deck in order to beat the game. And they are very, very broadly, do I have enough damage to kill my enemy? Do I have enough block to deflect all of the attacks? Okay, so then you break especially the damage part down into other layers. So do I have enough AoE damage? So can I hit multiple enemies? If the game throws me multiple enemies, you might have an amazing single target damage deck where you have maybe strength and your limit break is there, but all of your cards are single target damage cards, and you just can't deal with especially the Act 3 multi-enemy fights that the game throws at you. Another thing you might be asking you is, do I have enough scaling damage? So scaling damage is, for example, we'll talk limit break again. So limit break, if you don't know, doubles your strength and exhausts. It upgrades to double your strength and it doesn't exhaust. So especially when you upgrade it, you can just keep ramping and ramping and ramping if you have some strength. And that is the perfect example of scaling. And usually, pretty much always in this game, by the time you hit Act 2 boss into Act 3, you need some sort of scaling because your just normal attacks aren't going to hit it. I think that is definitely the most common knowledge form of damage. I think everybody thinks about that. For example, going to Mike's video, Cindy's video, Cindy picked limit break before he had any strength, and I think the reason he did that was he thought, well, this is such an important card for the strength-based deck. And he's right, it is a very important card. But instead of thinking this is an important card for a strength-based deck, think about, is this good for my scaling side of my deck? And when you think about it that way, it's actually not, because you don't have any strength yet. And right now the card does nothing for you scaling-wise. And when you think about scaling as in a bunch of things that isn't just strength scaling, because Ironclad has a bunch of ways to scale, then limit break becomes a lot weaker when you don't have strength, because yes, it's scaling, but it's not scaling that you can use right now, and there might be other forms of scaling you can use. And then there is, before we go into this last, I'll pick a card now, but I want to talk about one more very important form of damage, and that is early damage. So this, I think, is the one that definitely was the greatest learning for me, and I think made me a better Slay the Spire player. And it's really it's a very difficult concept to grasp when you're used to these control-based card games. So what early damage is they're cards that really aren't that useful in the end game. They are big, single target, usually damage cards that don't scale properly, and really all they do is just deal a lot of damage. They're useless in the end game because when you have your scaling package, whatever it is, your scaling package is the thing that will carry you damage wise into the through the last act and into the final boss. But your early damage cards, while they're useless at the end, are very, very important in Act 1 and in Act 2. And they are the perfect representation of how this game is different to a control-based game, because you're not trying to build the perfect deck. Those cards like Wild Strike, cards like Perfected Strike, usually in Ascension anyway, Perfected Strike, cards like Carnage, they have no place in this perfectly constructed, say, strength scaling deck. But they do have a massive place in Act 1, just killing things, because you need to get through Act 1 in order to get to Act 2 and Act 3, where your scaling comes in. So that's the really broad concept, and I'll try and point out, especially in Act 1, when I come up with a card that is going to be useless in the end game, but it's very, very important right now. Okay, so looking at these cards, I'm always now going to be talking in terms of my checklist. Okay, so what I want is, again, very, very broad strokes: damage to get through Act 1 and mitigation to keep me alive. Okay, so we'll go through each card so I can kind of explain. So Dropkick, not that much damage, deals 5 damage, I think upgrades into deal 8 damage. If the enemy is vulnerable, gain an energy and draw a card. So Dropkick can be very useful for recycling. And if I had a bit more vulnerable than just Bash, all I have is Bash right now, then Dropkick would be a lot more useful, but right now it's not great. Intimidate, apply 1 week to all enemies, isn't great. 1 to anything tends to be a lot worse than 2 to anything, if that makes sense, because when you use a weak or a weak when they're not attacking, or a vulnerable when you're not attacking, if it's just 1, then it's a completely useless card that turn, whereas if it's 2, yeah, you lose 1 turn at the start when you're not, say, attacking, or when it's not attacking when it's weak, but then the next turn it might be attacking and it becomes a bit more useful. Feel No Pain. So this is the card I'm going to pick. This is more of a kind of this takes a while to kind of understand why it's good, but Ironclad roughly has about 30% of cards that exhaust, that do something with exhaust. So Feel No Pain tends to be a very safe pick in terms of that you generally will pick up cards that will exhaust. The reason why it is very good, just full stop. But the reason why it's amazing in Act 1 is because you might come up against the sentries who are elites, and they'll put a bunch of dazes into your deck which will exhaust, and they will just gain you 3 block when they exhaust. So Feel No Pain is a direct counter to the sentries, and I'm going to pick it up here, number 1 because it's just a good card in general, and I'll try and point that out as the run goes through, just point out how much block Feel No Pain is giving me, but also against the sentries it's just it's a must pick. Okay, so I spent ages on that card pick there, but I wanted to explain the idea behind the different kind of checklists that we need to go through. So I won't spend as much going through the other cards. Okay, so Heavy Blade is a perfect example of a scaling card. Okay, a Heavy Blade is useless right now, deals 14 damage for 2, it's not good at all. But Strength affects this card 3 times, and it upgrades into Strength affects this card 5 times. So Heavy Blade is one of those cards that if you do get a bit of Strength later on, it does whopper damage. And these are the types of cards that will carry you into Act 3 and will beat the last boss for you. But right now, we're not picking it, and this is a really important point. So this is, you can kind of compare this to the Limit Break, for example. Yes, this card absolutely sets you up for the end game, but right now when I draw it, it's a dead card. I do 14 damage for 2, that's not enough, and it will weigh down my deck for the threats that we have to come. And I just have to trust that the game is going to give me more ways to scale going through the game. So I have to leave that right now because it's not going to help me right now. Havoc. Havoc is a nice card when you upgrade it because it goes to 0 mana. Any card that has 0 mana is potentially very strong. Play the top card of your draw pile and exhaust it. Also really, really good when you have big cost cards in your deck. So say if you have a Demon Form, Barricade, even stuff like Shockwave, Clothesline, all those 2 mana cards can be very nice to play for 0 mana. Right now though, again, not going to pick it because it doesn't help me with Act 1. True Grit. True Grit doesn't amazingly help in Act 1. Act 1, I need damage. That is the main thing you need in Act 1 to get you through. But it is okay right now. Gives me 7 block, gives me 10 block if I have Feel No Pain in play, because Feel No Pain gives you 3 block when you exhaust anything. So 10 block for 1 mana is pretty good. And also exhausts a random card in your hand. Right now my deck is full of cards that I don't mind exhausting. There's only 4 cards right now that I don't want to exhaust, so it's not too bad of a pick. Also one of those cards, this is a card that will be useful in the late game, but it's also okay to have now, so because it does something right now. That's a really important thing, so I'm going to pick that. So there you got an example of True Grit being a bit useful. He was doing, what was he doing, 6 damage I think. Normal block gives me 5, and I blocked for 7 with 1. So you can see, well, True Grit isn't amazing right now, it's doing something, which Heavy Blade really wouldn't be doing. Okay, so gonna go with Anger here. Anger is, I think I might have said this in my last video, but Anger is a good example of a card that is pretty good now and can be very good also. It also might scale. So Anger deals 6 damage, which isn't a lot, but it's 0 mana and it'll duplicate itself. It'll upgrade into 8. So doing 8 damage for 0 mana can be very nice. So that is a decent amount to help me in Act 1. And then later on, when you get say maybe some relics like Kunai, which gives you Kunai and Shuriken, which give you dexterity and strength. If you play 3 attacks in a turn, Anger can be very good with that. If I get a lot of card draw in my later game, Anger is a scaling card then, because you keep playing Anger, you keep doing a lot of card draw, and suddenly you have like you've drawn 7 cards and 4 of them are Anger, and you know you're dealing 32 damage for 0 mana. So Anger it can also be a scaling card, but right now it's decent enough to pick as just you'll see it now in say the elite fight and the boss. It'll just give me another attack that I wouldn't have mana to play otherwise, and that's just useful enough right now. Okay, this event will give you an award based on what you give it. If you give it, I think, a rare card, it'll give you max HP up. I think if you give it a uncommon, it will heal you. But more often than not, I use this, especially in Act 1, as just as a nice way to exhaust a card. Or sorry, get rid of a card. So I'm just going to give it a strike. It's going to give me nothing, but yeah. Okay, so a few choices here. So again, when we look at our checklist in Act 1 at the very, very top is damage. Do I have enough damage to get through the elites, and do I have enough damage to get through the final boss? Or sorry, the Act 1 boss. And right now, we only have Anger as a pickup. We've upgraded 2 strikes, which is decent. But our only kind of plus damage card we picked up is Anger, which isn't great. So we still need more. We're going to upgrade Bash. It'll apply 3 vulnerable and 10 damage, which is quite nice. The extra turn of vulnerability is very good damage-wise. And now we're going to go into our boss. So we're hoping for sentries here. No, Gremlin Knob. Okay. Not a great start there. We're going to apply vulnerable to Gremlin Knob. So Gremlin Knob, it's a race basically. You need to deal as much damage to him as possible before he kills you. So it works. So what I'm deciding here is, do I defend here? It'll block for 3 because he'll get 2 strength when I do it. If I do that though, I need to kill him next turn because he'll get an extra, that 2 strength will hurt me next turn. And I need to do 13 damage. He is vulnerable. He's vulnerable, so all we need is 2 strikes. Yeah. Okay. Question card. Future card rewards have 1 additional card to choose from. That's quite nice. Okay. Twin Strike is a very, very weak form of damage right now. It does 10 damage for 1, which is okay. Upgrades, I think, to deal 14 damage for 1, which is decent, to be fair. But in terms of some of the other cards you can pick, it's not amazing. Say Wild Strike, for example, does 12 unupgraded and 18 upgraded. So it's so much stronger than Twin Strike. Twin Strike is also a semi-scaling card, for example. Anytime that you do multiple hits, strength can be very good with it. But it's just I'm not sure if it's good enough right now. I don't think we're that desperate. We're certainly not desperate at all for scaling. We don't need to really think about scaling at all until we go into Act 2. Right now, we're just thinking about, can I survive Act 1? Unless it's an incredibly good scaling card that we were offered for free. But Twin Strike is not an incredibly good scaling card, and it's not really decent enough to get us through. I don't really want it right now. I'm not desperate enough for damage right now to pick it. Thunderclap is not great, just in general. It's AoE, but it's very, very weak form of AoE. Again, Havoc, we spoke about Havoc. Don't think we need Havoc right now. So I'm going to skip that. Okay, so there's 10 block there getting from field mapping. 1 damage off. That's unfortunate. Feeling the pain. Giving us another bit of block there. Now you can see why anger is quite strong. Okay. Spoke about heavy blade already. Still don't need that scaling. Warcry is okay if you upgrade it. Draws 2 cards. Put a card from your hand onto the top of your draw pile. Again, really, really nice if you have Havoc, which you're offered a few times, but we're not going to pick it yet. Flex is pretty terrible unless it's in very, very specific circumstances. So you always have to be very careful when you draw a card that doesn't do anything on its own. So imagine the scenario where you're drawing 5 cards and you draw maybe 3 blocks, a power, 1 attack, and flex. Flex is only giving you an extra 2 strength. That is so much worse than even just a normal strike, which does 5 damage. Flex is just giving you 2 damage. That's all it's doing. And in a game where every single card you draw is incredibly important, Flex just does not do enough, unless you can maybe, for example, say if you got the relic runic pyramid, which means you keep all of the cards in your hand, you don't discard them after you end your turn. Flex gets a little bit better then, because you can hold it until the perfect turn to just power up, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Flame Barrier. Flame Barrier is very, very strong block card. Gains 12 block, upgrades to gains 16 block. Whenever you attack this turn, deal 4 damage back, and it upgrades, I think, until it deals 6 damage back. So very, very good block card that can also do a good bit of damage depending on multi-attacks. So if we go and look at the final boss is, never remember his name, I want to say the Guardian. The Guardian does multi-attacks. He does a ×4 attack, and he does a ×2 attack. So Flame Barrier gets a lot stronger against him. I think even if we were up against, say, Slime Boss, which is just a guy who does like big attacks, I'd still pick Flame Barrier. It's a very, very nice block card and does a little bit of damage back. It's nice. I'm not like, I'll take this happily, but we're still looking for more damage. Blue Candle, unplayable curse cards can now be played. Whenever you play a curse, lose 1 HP and exhaust it. Okay, so we can now play curse cards. Not an amazing relic, to be honest. Okay. This guy's doing quite a bit of damage right now. I would like to bash him, but we are taking 18 damage and we are going into an elite. Actually, yeah, we're in a bit of trouble here. So we need to be very careful about how much damage we take here. Okay. So we're going to split him here. Not an amazing split, but it stops the damage. Flame Barrier blocks fully. Okay. Okay. We don't need another True Grit. Anger, we don't really need more than 1 anger. 1 is enough. Inflame is very good with anger. It essentially upgrades anger because anger upgraded does 8 damage. So if we play in Inflame, we get 8. It's quite good. Inflame is a bit slow now to get us through the Act 1. Spending a turn to spend, especially when you only have 3 mana, spending 1 mana to play just 2 strength is a bit slow. It's fine in the later game, but right now it's slow. But it might be what we need to do that little bit of damage for anger to carry us through Act 1. Fire Breathing, one I want to talk about. So this is one that Cinny picked, and I don't really rate it as a card, just because it's not a good enough. It's an AOE card, so you have to then think, well, how much AOE is this doing for me? So you'll typically play maybe 3. So with anger, for example, let's say the perfect place for fire breathing. You have an anger, you have a lot of card draw. You'll play maybe 2.5 attacks per turn, let's say. So you're doing, let's even be generous and say 3. You're doing 3 damage to all enemies every turn, and that's in the most generous circumstance, right? The really good AoE cards, so Whirlwind and Immolate, for example. Immolate does 28 damage when you play it. And it puts burns into your decks, but burns is not a massive deal. Even Combust, for example, you take 1 damage and you deal 5 damage to all enemies at the end of every turn. Upgrades into deal 7 damage to all enemies. There are just way more effective AoE cards for Ironclad than fire breathing. It just doesn't do enough for you, and that's not even taking into account that on the turn you play it, you're going to have to spend 1 mana playing it, which is it does nothing right now, and then it doesn't really even scale into the late game. So it's not a card you would pick right now because it just doesn't do enough damage to get you through the Act 1 boss, and in the later game it doesn't do enough damage to scale for you to get you through Act 3. So yeah, I would never really pick this card. We're going to go with Inflame, I think. I'm not 100% sure about this pick, to be honest, but I think we go for it because we have Anger and it'll help us. Okay, so this is going to be tough. Once we get through this boss, I think we'll be good because we get 2 rests, but we're hoping for sentries here. Perfect. Okay. So we get to play Inflame, which is great. And full block. So you'll see the power of Feeling the Pain against the sentries. So again, the strategies against the sentries, you want to kill one of the outer ones first, and kill the one with the lowest HP, which doesn't really apply here. But so you can see with Feel No Pain, we're just this is the part now in the sentry battle where things get a little bit scary because your deck is just starting to get full up with dazes and your draws are starting to be crap. But we just got 9 block from that, so you can see pretty hard counter to the sentries. Full block. Okay, easy peasy. Okay, so this is, to be honest, never really know the correct answer to this. Demon Form is a card right now that we have very little use for. We're going to really struggle to play it. We might get really lucky and come up against the boss and he might be doing nothing to us and we might draw Demon Form. Like he might be blocking, for example, and we draw Demon Form and we get to play it for free that turn. More often than not, though, it's going to be drawn into our hand against the final boss. Sorry, excuse me, the Act 1 boss. And we are not going to be able to play it. So Demon Form right now represents a card that is not going to help us get through Act 1. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of flickering. I'm just going to see what this is. I'm not sure if that'll resolve it or not. But so it's not going to help us right now. It is a scaling card, though. It's a really good example of a scaling card. You play it, and then you just try and survive through the turns, and you'll just get gradually stronger and stronger and stronger. But right now, it doesn't help us. we are coming towards the end of Act 1. We, I think, probably have enough about us to beat the Guardian or whatever it's called. So we could take it. It's up against Rampage and Searing Blow, which are not good cards. Rampage, both of these are like, it's actually interesting. Both of these are kind of, they fit into a certain play style. And it's a really good example of how the game doesn't work this way. It's not. So Rampage and Searing Blow have very specific win conditions. Rampage, you keep playing it and you draw it back, and you play it and you draw it back, and da 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 da. Searing Blow, you pick it up and you only upgrade Searing Blow. And these two cards, you then use them and you build your deck around them to win you to beat the Act 3 boss. That's the idea behind them. The thing about why they don't work, they probably work on normal, but when you get into Ascension, they just stop working because the game isn't built around this quote-unquote build. You just can't, your deck has to be the jack of all trades. It can't be so refined to, for example, you're never going to get a deck, or very rarely going to get a deck where you where you just constantly recycle Rampage and you constantly get it back and you're doing loads of damage. It's just not going to work that way. You're going to need to block. You're going to need to weaken your enemies. You're just not going to draw that much card draw usually. So there are those very, very specific circumstances where they do work, but usually not. And then Searing Blow, it's the same. You're just not going to be able to constantly hit hit campfires to upgrade them, because sometimes you're going to need to rest, because you're just not going to have enough mitigation to block all damage, or you're not going to get the Reaper, which heals you, which is an AoE damage card that heals you for the damage you get. You're not going to get that deck where you don't need to use the campfires to rest, or you're just going to have other cards that you need to upgrade to get you to the run. You can't just upgrade this every turn. So these two cards are actually a really good example of how the quote-unquote build in Slay Spire just doesn't work. Shrug-It-Off is what's competing with Demon Form here. Shrug-It-Off is ticking, is why it's such a good card. It checks two of the of our kind of checklists that we need. We need to block, obviously, and Ironclad struggles with card draw, so it gives us that a little bit of card draw as well. So really tough, I think, decision here. I think the safer option is definitely Shrug-It-Off. Like we might get a Demon Form pick when we beat the Act 1 boss. So that's the safe pick. Probably go Demon Form. I think we can get away with Demon Form. Yeah, we have 2 rests ahead of us. I think we can get away with Demon Form. Okay, so here's a funny example. We could play Demon Form right now, but the looter, his whole mechanic is he hits you a few times, he steals your gold, then he defends, and then the turn after defense he runs. So we need to hit this guy hard, and we might be in trouble here. I don't think we can hit him hard. Now we need to do, I don't think we're going to get, oh, we are. Upgraded strikes for the win, Hand and Flame. So if you kill him, then you get your gold back. Okay, so don't think any of the cards here fit. So we spoke with Thunderclap, spoke with Dropkick. We still only have the one vulnerable. Yeah, so Dropkick still isn't amazing. Now it does give you 3 turns of vulnerable, but yeah, I don't think we need it. Entrench is okay if you have a lot of block. You don't even need Barricade to make this work, which I think is a mistake a lot of people fall into. Entrench can just be sometimes good. Upgrades into 1 mana. Once you do that, it's very easy to play, and it'll give you a lot of block. So it can be quite useful. Blood for Blood is a nice damage card, but I don't think we're taking enough damage. You want to get this down to 0 mana, which means you have to get hit 4 times. So yeah, I don't think we need it right now. Okay, so we're going to Smith here, and we're going to upgrade Anger. We need more damage. Okay, this is a problem. So our deck has no AoE right now, which isn't massively unusual in Act 1. And we were offered, I think the only AoE card we were offered was whatever that vulnerable card was, can't remember the name of it. So yeah, this is obviously an AoE fight. So we're in a little bit of trouble here. Okay, so again, demon form completely clogging up our hand. Imagine if we had Shrug It Off here, we get 8 block and we draw a card. So much stronger than demon form right now. Need to start killing this wizard because he's going to do a big attack soon. Two Fiona Pains is absolutely fine. You just need to, once you start picking the second one, you need to start thinking about how much exhaust you're putting into your deck, because you know, you already have the one to counter the sentries. The one is nice in general, but spending 2 mana and having 2 of these draws starts to clog up your hand unless you start to get a lot of exhaust. We still only have True Grit, so once we play True Grit, it's our Fiona Pains are completely useless. Thunderclap is the name of that card. So still, after Thunderclap, we're not getting any proper AoEs. So again, this is another decision. Fiona Pain is going to be, again, pretty useless. Second Fiona Pain, rather, is going to be pretty useless against the Guardian, Final Act 1 boss. So we need to start thinking, do we have enough right now to beat the Final Act 1 boss, and is Fiona Pain going to clog up our hand and our deck to kind of hamper that even further? Which it is, but is it going to hamper further enough for us to lose the fight? I think I'm going to go for it. Again, this is like demon form. This is another, I'm starting to think now of Act 2 and Act 3, because I think I have Act 1 down. I think I have enough damage. But I could be wrong. I'm not 100% positive in this. And I think if we were on Greater Ascension, I'd probably be dead. But because we're on Ascension 6, I think we can afford to do this. So you can see now, right now, these two are like really clogged up our deck. Imagine if we drew a demon form there, for example. Which you did, but we can't play. I'm going to use Thorns, I think, just to help us get that damage to beat the Guardian. Yes, I was right. I'm going to use True Grit here to exhaust a defend, just so it trims our deck down a little bit. Okay, so here's an example of where I can use Demon Form, and I think we're probably safe to do it. We just take 7 damage for it. Nice, we got rid of a strike there, which is perfect. And we can afford to hit him. Can we afford to hit him twice? Yeah, we can. There's a ×4 attack. So anger here. I think we're going to lose one of the strikes just so we defend. I'm not too cut up about that, to be honest. I think I was a little bit harsh in the Feel No Pain. Like, it's generating, it's giving True Grit an extra 6 block every time I use it. So I think I think I was wrong about that. Okay, yeah, we started to crush him now. Perfect. And that is the Act 1 boss down. Okay, this is an easy pick. I'll explain why though. So Reaper is the card we're going to pick here. Okay, so let's talk about how this goes into our checklist. So mitigation is is one of the big boxes to tick, and mitigation. I'm not sure at the start did I say block or mitigation, but the correct term is mitigation because block is a part of that, but healing is also a part of mitigation. And a thing that Ironclad can be very, very good at is taking a bunch of damage to the face and then just healing it all back up again. So you actually don't need to block. And the way you do that is if you can, up your max HP, which we don't. 72 is not great. And then you get something like Reaper. And so Reaper deals 4 damage to all enemies, and you heal HP equal to unblocked damage, and then you exhaust it. So the way you play Reaper is you get Strength. And we right now have Inflame and we have Demon Form. And so when we play those cards, Reaper now starts to do for like 10 damage, maybe 12 damage to all enemies. And if you are playing against 2 or 3 enemies, you can see how much HP that'll get you back. So campfires, we can start using them to upgrade now. Or we can just say block isn't as important now because we can take the hit to the face and then heal it just back up. So that goes into our mitigation package. And when you're looking through the checklists, again, it's not really a build. There's tons of way to make Reaper work. For example, we might have it's always tends to be strength, or say put vulnerable on the enemies, but it's a little synergy, and those little synergies help to build up these packages. Reaper doesn't really have anything to do with how we're going to do enough damage to get through Act 3 boss, but it helps the other side of our deck, which is getting us through the floors and such. And then it'll have only that one turn burst against the boss, but say the Act 3 boss, which isn't going to be that useful. So you can see how it doesn't fit into that perfectly constructed idea of beating the Act 3 boss, because the Reaper in Act 3 isn't going to be that useful to the Act 3 boss, but it is going to be very, very useful in hall fights, getting us through the hall fights. Looking at the other cards here, Brutality at start of your turn, lose 1 HP and draw 1 card is decent, and it would definitely be a card I would consider if Reaper wasn't up, because we are struggling with card draw right now. In fact, we have nothing that draws us cards, so that is absolutely something that we are going to have to address in Act 2 and 3. So again, thinking about this checklist, thinking about becoming this jack of all trades, and this is the way I think you need to think about Slay the Spire as you're playing it, because then the card picks become a lot more interesting and understandable. You're not just getting 3 cards and going, well, I don't know, I'll pick the card I like. And it's definitely a mistake that a lot of people make, that where they know a card that they like and they got offer and say for example you like the card Inflame, okay, so it gives you 2 strength, upgrades it to 3 strength, and you've played it before and it's really good. So you're offered it once in Act 1, twice in Act 2, and then you're offered it again in Act 3, okay, and you're looking at Inflame and you're going, well, I really like this card. You have to think, you have to step away from I like this card and step into what's this card doing for me in my checklist, okay, because it's giving you 2 strength and giving you 3 strength, and if this is your 4th pick, right, you're already on, let's say it's with the other 3 cards, maybe 1 is upgraded, you're already on like 7 strength, for example. You don't need another one. 7 strength is loads to get you through a boss, especially if you have your heavy blows, for example, heavy blades, your what are they called, the times, whatever the times attacks are. Ironclad has a bunch of them. That's fine, especially then if your 4th Inflame is up against, say, a Shrug It Off, which is the 8 block, draw 1 card, and your deck might be absolutely gasping for some card draw, but unless you're thinking about that, you're just going to look at Inflame and go, I like this card, and it's going to pick another one, and it does nothing for you. Well, it does a little bit for you, but it does so little compared to what more block might do, or what more card draw might do, or what a card that applies weak might do, or a card that applies vulnerable might do. You might have no cards that apply vulnerable except for bash, and that extra turn of vulnerable might be just so much better, or AoE or whatever. There's a bunch of cards. So that's a really good. That's the perfect way to kind of to think about it. It's these checklists, all these different things, and then when you get offered this array of cards, you can say, okay, well, what does my deck need right now? And so when I look at my deck, what does my deck need right now? Well, I'm looking for more exhaust because I have 2 Feel No Pains, and I'm getting quite a lot of block from that. I need more attack cards. I have Bash, I have Anger, and I have a bunch of strikes. That's kind of it. But now that we're out of Act 1, I'm going to be much more choosy on my attack cards. I'm probably not going to pick a Wild Strike now, or I'm not going to pick a Carnage now, because you just saw us school the Act 1 boss. I have enough damage to get through the fights that ask, do you have enough damage to get through me, if that makes sense. What I don't have enough of is the cards that say, do you have enough scaling now to get through me? Anger is quite nice scaling, but that's pretty much the only attack scaling card that I have. But then it becomes interesting then, because you're thinking, okay, well, I have a scaling package here. I have Demon Form, I have Inflame, I have Anger. Okay, so there's multiple ways you can approach this. You can say it depends on what the game gives you, but there's not just a one road, right? The game could say to me, okay, I'm never giving you a heavy blade again. It's unlikely, but let's say it does, or it'll never give me any of those ×3 or ×4 attacks. Okay, but what it might do is give me a bunch of block cards, or it might give me intangible cards. The event that gives you intangible, it might give me a bunch of mitigation. And that might be fine. Demon Form, Inflame, and Anger might be enough to just win me the act if I get enough other stuff to help me. If I get enough block, if I get enough strength for Reaper to go off. We haven't picked Reaper, but we're going to pick Reaper. If I get a ton of exhaust and Feel No Pain just starts going off. So there's a bunch of ways that I can approach this, but the main thing is you need to think about what you need. Okay. Another thing, obviously, that I spoke about, that I'm dying for card draw. So I'm going to massively prioritize card draw. So when I see, say, a Battle Trance come up, which is a 0 mana, draw 4 cards, you can't draw any more cards this turn card, I'm going to absolutely pick that. If an Offering comes up, which is draw 5 cards, get 2 mana, deal 6 damage to yourself, I draw 3 cards, sorry, I think, I'm going to pick that. They're going to be very, very useful cards. So that's the way you need to be thinking going forward. So Brutality, yeah, really useful for that. Draws me 1 card, but I like Reaper more. Berserk, I think Berserk came up in my last run. Don't love the gain 3 vulnerable. And actually, do you know, I think I got offered Berserk in the exact same scenario, Act 1 boss. And I said, well, I'm hoping that I'll get an energy relic. And I didn't last time, but I'm going to take the same approach here. Exhume, very, very nice when you have a little exhaust package going on. It has some nice synergies. It has some really nice synergies with Reaper. And it has obviously some nice synergies with Feel No Pain, because you exhaust something, you bring it back, you exhaust it again, whatever. But it's not doing enough for me that Reaper could do at the moment. So I'm going to pick Reaper. And I'm going to hope for an energy relic. Okay. This could be an interesting run. So I've got 2 energy relics and 1 snack away. So Fusion Hammer means I can't smith at rest sites. Don't love that. There's a lot of cards that would like to smith. I want to get the Feel No Pains up. I want to get the Reaper up, probably. Demon Form, Flame Barrier. Truget definitely needs to be upgraded, so that's a no-no. Gain energy, so I get an energy relic. Whenever you open a non-boss chest, obtain a curse. Okay, this is not too bad because I have Blue Candle, which means anytime I get a curse, yeah, I'll draw it, which will block a draw for me, but then I can just play it and it doesn't sit in my deck for the rest of that battle. So this could be a very good pick. Snecko is the pick I'm going to go for here, though, and it is an interesting one. So a lot of people, so what it does, right, at the start of your turn, draw 2 additional cards and start each to combat Confuse. And what Confuse does is it randomizes the cost of your cards. Okay, so it can go from anywhere to 0 to 3. And this is the part that everybody gets locked on, is the confused part. And it's massive. It can make demon form cost less than 3, which is really good. Flame barrier, you want to be looking at cards where you have 2 mana, Reaper. Any cards that are 1 mana are not as good, and any cards that are 0 mana are terrible. So if I pick Snecko Eye, I'm probably going to have to get rid of Anger. Which is interesting after what I just said about maybe Anger is enough with Demon Form and Inflame. But now I'm saying I maybe have to get rid of it. So yeah, that's a problem. But what Snecko Eye does is, and I think it's the thing that people don't look enough at, and certainly I didn't. I had to be told this basically. You draw 2 additional cards at the start of your turn. Drawing 2 additional cards at the start of your turn is crazy strong. It gives you so many more options. Ironclad is a card that already struggles for card draw, but if you're drawing 2 extra cards per turn, that pretty much solves all your card draw needs straight away. It's always nice to have more, sure, but drawing 2 extra cards every turn is incredible. That's why I'm going to pick it. Now, it'll be interesting because it's going to ruin Anger on me, and I'm going to have to find another way of getting some damage and some hopefully scaling damage. And I've upgraded it, which is a waste of an upgrade, which is a shame. But it just does a lot for me right now. While it ruins Anger, it makes Demon Form a lot better. It makes potentially Reaper, Flame Barrier, Bash a lot better. Now it makes Feel No Pain, True Grit, and Flame, and all these cards here worse, probably. But that's the downside, quote unquote downside to Snecko Eye. A card a relic that makes a few cards a little bit worse, but some cards very, very strong. The upside is the 2 cards per turn, and that is just so important to our deck. So I'm going to be going for Snecko Eye, and it's definitely a controversial relic. It can sometimes screw you over with Confused, but in general I just think it's very, very strong. Okay, so I'm going to end the video there, and we'll pick the next one up going through Act 2. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.